The auction yard always smelled the same: dust, diesel, and disappointment. It was the kind of place where machines came to die. Bent plows, rusted combines, and tractors that hadn't turned over in years sat in crooked lines like forgotten soldiers. Their paint had faded under the harsh sun, their metal eaten away by time. Men walked through the rows with experienced eyes, kicking tires, lifting hoods, judging value in seconds. Deals were made quickly here. No one came looking for miracles. Except Ethan Carter. He stood near the back row, away from the crowd, staring at a tractor most people hadn't even bothered to inspect. It was an old John Deere, once green and proud, now dull and flaking. One tire sagged low, nearly flat. The seat was torn open, foam spilling out like it had given up trying to hold together. But Ethan didn't see junk. He saw possibility. "Son, you lost," a voice called out behind him. Ethan turned. A middle-aged man in a clean jacket and polished boots approached, a badge clipped to his chest marking him as a dealer. "I'm good," Ethan replied. The man followed his gaze to the tractor, and chuckled. "That thing," he said. "You serious?" Ethan nodded. The dealer shook his head slowly, like he'd seen this mistake too many times before. "That tractor hasn't run in over a decade. Engines probably seized. Transmissions likely shot. You'd be better off buying parts scrap." Ethan stepped closer to the machine, running his hand across the rough metal of the hood. Dust coated his fingers, but he didn't pull away. "How much?" he asked. The dealer let out a short laugh. "Auction starts it at 75. But trust me, that's 75 too much." Around them, a few men overheard and glanced over. One of them smirked. "Kid thinks he found gold." Ethan didn't respond. Inside, though, his thoughts were anything but calm. $75, that's almost everything I have. He swallowed. It wasn't just money, it was risk. If this didn't work, he'd have nothing to show for it. But something inside him refused to let go. He leaned down, peering under the tractor. Rust, dirt, oil stains, but also something else. It hadn't been completely abandoned. There were signs of past care. Bolts that looked replaced. A line that had been repaired at some point. Someone had once believed in this machine. That was enough for Ethan. "I'll take it," he said. The dealer raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah." The man shrugged. "Your money." The gavel came down minutes later. "Sold for $75. A few scattered laughs followed. Ethan didn't hear them. The tractor arrived at his small farm later that day on the back of a borrowed trailer. His house wasn't much, just a simple structure with peeling paint and a tin roof that rattled when the wind picked up. But behind it stood a small shed. That's where the tractor went. Ethan stood there for a long time after unloading it, hands on his hips, staring. Up close, it looked worse. Cracks in the hoses, oil caked thick around the engine block, wires that looked brittle enough to snap if touched. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if they were right? He exhaled slowly. "No," he muttered. "We'll see." The next morning, before the sun had even touched the horizon, Ethan stepped into the shed. The air was cold. His breath fogged as he moved. He pulled a rag from his pocket and got to work. No plan, no guide, just effort. He started simple, cleaning, wiping away years of grime, clearing out debris, taking off parts he didn't understand just to see how they fit together. Hours passed. His fingers grew stiff. His back ached. But he didn't stop. When the sun finally rose, casting golden light through the cracks in the wooden walls, Ethan stepped back. It didn't look much better, but it was cleaner. And for some reason, that felt like progress. That became day 1. Day 2 looked almost the same. So did day 3. And day 10. At first, it was frustrating. Bolts wouldn't budge. Parts broke unexpectedly. Tools slipped from his hands. More than once, he slammed a wrench down in anger. "Why won't you just work?" he snapped one morning. The tractor, of course, gave no answer. But something changed in those early weeks. Ethan stopped expecting results. Instead, he focused on showing up. Every morning, before anything else, he went to the shed. It didn't matter how tired he was. It didn't matter if the previous day had gone badly. He showed up. That was the rule. At first, it felt forced. Like discipline. But slowly, it became something else. A habit. Winter came, and with it, freezing mornings that made metal feel like ice against his skin. Ethan wrapped his hands in old cloth just to keep working. His neighbor, Mr. Harlan, stopped by one day, watching from the doorway. "You're still at it?" the old man asked. Ethan nodded, tightening a bolt. Mr. Harlan chuckled. "That tractor ain't worth the effort." Ethan paused, then looked up. "Maybe not," he said. "But I am." The old man didn't reply. He just watched for a moment longer, then left. Spring brought mud and rain. Water leaked into the shed. Tools rusted if left out. Some days, Ethan accomplished almost nothing. He'd spend hours just trying to loosen a single stuck part. And still, he came back the next day. By the time a full year had passed, something strange had happened. The tractor still didn't run. But Ethan had changed. His hands moved differently now, more confident. He understood things he hadn't before. The engine no longer looked like a mystery. It looked like a puzzle. And puzzles could be solved. 2 years in, people stopped asking about the tractor. 3 years in, they forgot about it completely. But inside the shed, something quiet and powerful was happening. Ethan wasn't just fixing a machine. He was building a rhythm, a routine, a way of life. One morning, after countless failed attempts, Ethan turned the key again. Nothing. He sighed, leaning back. "All right," he muttered. "What am I missing?" He checked the fuel line, adjusted a connection, wiped his hands. "Try again." He turned the key. The engine sputtered. Ethan froze. It wasn't much, just a weak, uneven sound. But it was alive, for the first time in over a decade. The tractor responded. A slow smile spread across his face. Not excitement, not celebration, just quiet satisfaction. "Okay," he whispered. "We're getting somewhere." He didn't run to tell anyone. He didn't stop working. He just came back the next day. Like always. Because by then, Ethan understood something most people didn't. Big moments don't create success. Small, repeated actions do. And he had built something stronger than motivation. He had built a habit. The morning sun rose slower these days, or maybe Ethan Carter had simply learned how to notice it. Golden light stretched across his land, touching rows of crops that stood tall and even, like soldiers shaped by patience. The air smelled different here than it did years ago. Not of dust and abandonment, but of growth, of routine, of work done right. 16 years had passed since that day in the auction yard. 16 years since the laughter. And now, no one laughed when they said his name. Ethan stood at the edge of his field, arms crossed, watching one of his newer tractors move steadily through the soil. It was modern, powerful, efficient, everything that old $75 machine was not. But still, every evening, without fail, Ethan walked back to the same wooden shed behind his house. The shed hadn't changed much. The paint still peeled, the door still creaked. Time had touched it, but it hadn't taken it. And inside sat the old tractor. It looked better now, not perfect, but alive. The paint had been partially restored. The tires replaced. The engine, after years of work, could run. Not smoothly, not reliably, but enough. Enough to remind Ethan where he started. That evening, like every other, he stepped inside the shed, closing the door behind him. The outside world, his success, his responsibilities, his reputation, stayed out there. In here, he was still the same man. Same hands, same habit. He grabbed a rag, wiped down the engine, and listened to the quiet. For most people, this would have been pointless work. But for Ethan, it was something deeper. It was grounding, a reminder, a return to discipline. He leaned over the engine, inspecting a small oil leak he had noticed days earlier. "All right," he murmured, "let's see what you're hiding." Carefully, he began removing parts, one bolt at a time. His movements were slow, practiced. 16 years ago, he would have rushed. Now, he understood. Rushing breaks things. Consistency builds them. As he loosened a worn-out gasket deep inside the engine, something caught his eye. He paused. That's strange. A metal plate, small, out of place, sat tucked behind a section that shouldn't have had anything there. Ethan frowned. He had worked on this engine for years. Taken it apart piece by piece. How had he never noticed this before? He wiped away grease, revealing edges that didn't match the original design. "This isn't factory," he whispered. His heartbeat picked up slightly. Not out of excitement, but curiosity. He reached for a smaller tool and carefully pried at the plate. It didn't budge at first. "Come on." He adjusted his grip, applied steady pressure. And with a soft click, it loosened. Ethan froze for a moment, staring at the hidden compartment now slightly open. 16 years. 16 years of work, and something had been sitting here the entire time. Waiting. Slowly, he opened it. Inside, wrapped tightly in old oilcloth, was a bundle. Small, deliberate, hidden with purpose. Ethan gently pulled it out, setting it on the workbench. For a second, he just looked at it. Not touching, not rushing, because something about this moment felt important. He unwrapped the cloth carefully. Layer by layer, inside were papers, old, yellowed, fragile, and a small notebook. Ethan picked it up, brushing dust from the cover. No name, no label, just worn leather, softened by time. He opened it. The first page stopped him. Not because it was surprising, but because it felt familiar. Wake before sunrise. Ethan blinked. A small breath escaped him. He turned the page. Fix one thing every day, even if it's small. Another page. Don't wait for the right mood. Work anyway. Ethan sat down slowly on the wooden stool beside the bench. His hands, rough and steady from years of labor, suddenly felt still. He kept reading. Page after page described a life built not on big wins, but small actions. Daily discipline, relentless consistency, habits. The handwriting belonged to the tractor's original owner, a farmer long gone. But his thoughts, his mindset, it felt like looking into a mirror. One line was underlined twice, darker than the rest. Success is not built in a day. It is built daily. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Not out of emotion, but recognition. "I didn't know you," he said quietly, almost as if the man could hear him. "But I lived the same way." He leaned back, looking at the old tractor. For years, he thought he was fixing it. But now, it felt like it had been shaping him. He continued going through the contents. Receipts, old maintenance logs, careful notes of repairs. This wasn't just a farmer. This was a man who believed in systems, in habits, in showing up. At the bottom of the compartment, beneath the papers, Ethan found a small cloth pouch. He picked it up. It had weight. A different kind of curiosity settled in. He untied the string. Inside were old bills and coins, saved over time. Not a fortune, but meaningful. Every dollar carefully set aside. Every amount likely earned through effort, not luck. Ethan smiled slightly, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. This man didn't chase quick success. He built it, slowly, patiently, daily. Ethan placed everything back on the bench and looked around the shed. The same shed where it all began. The same place where people once saw failure. But he saw opportunity. And suddenly, the laughter from 16 years ago echoed faintly in his mind. The dealer's voice. "You're throwing money away, son." Ethan let out a quiet breath. "No," he said softly. "I was building something." The next morning, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He rolled the old tractor out of the shed. The sunlight hit it fully, highlighting every imperfection, every repaired part, every mark of time. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. He climbed onto the seat, adjusting himself. For a moment, he just sat there, hands on the wheel, thinking. Then he turned the key. The engine coughed, struggled, and then, it started. A rough, uneven roar filled the air. But it was strong enough. Strong enough to move. Ethan drove it slowly into the field. Not because he needed it, but because it meant something. Each turn of the wheel, each vibration of the engine, carried 16 years of effort behind it. As the sun rose higher, casting light across the land, Ethan smiled. Not wide, not proud, just steady, because now he understood something deeper than ever before. The tractor was never just a machine. The hidden notebook was never just a surprise. And the money was never the reward. The real value was the habit he had built, the discipline he had lived, the man he had become. Great success is not found, it is formed. Not in one moment, but in many small, repeated actions. Habits shape your future long before results appear. What you do every day quietly builds the life you will one day live.